Evening, everybody. I saw you when you have my test results.
Good day. I wonder if we have them already because I thought he would have already sent it to us.
I didn't even know.
Well, at least we got another test to do and another case study. If
Yeah, thank God for that. Because I don't know. I can remember the 5 audit objectives for nothing. It was just like 5, not even like 2 or 3, like whole 5. Like that
five
just for
audit
me.
objective, I thought it was only two.
Yeah, so the 5 audit objectives that for me left like everything going straight out my brain when I see that.
He must see made 5 features that make something true and fair or something. Because I thought it was only second primary and secondary objective.
Oh, the 5 objectives of audit. That look in the notes.
No, you're talking about what qualifies an audit. I something like that. I think that's what you I'm talking about.
It was 5. You had to list 5.
Yeah, that's it.
5, the 5 audit objectives, right?
I think it's objective.
It was an
The
objective.
objective is two. It's the primary and the secondary or incidental.
No, I even ain't mean that one. No,
The 5 I think had to do with the characteristics of an auditor.
You mean like unethical, unlawful, and all that?
Right.
No.
It had to be clear-headedness, and he had given two examples in that.
No,
In the
man.
question, he gave 2 examples, and you had to list another 3.
No, that one was
Oh.
the principles. That one there was the principles of audit. That was the question he asked. The one was she talking about with the 5 is where he asked us to say what would make the audit. It was something to do with true and fair or something like that, and it had 5 stuff to list.
After unethical, unlawful, unfair, it must not contain untrue, unfair. What I read some of the 5 objectives of audits, and I think should have been the answer. So I don't know. I must be confused now based on what you're telling me.
Yeah, because from what the
objectives of audit, adequate audit planning helps to ensure appropriate attention is devoted to important areas of not that A. Okay. Well, I don't know. Because I remember it's supposed to be untrue, unfair, unethical, unlawful, and something else. Immoral. Something like that.
You mean what qualities that an auditor should not have?
And that what I just spoke to, I think that has to do something with audit, something true and fair. It was so confusing. Well, you have so much information in your head, you confuse yourself.
The problem with me was like being able to identify these stuff based off the question he asked, because like you have to list a bunch of stuff based off the word features or based off the word principles or based off the word objectives. So you have to know them words, those keywords, to then know what list you want put. Because you may know the list, but you might be putting the wrong list based on the word that he asked.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's why I feel like I got confused up, because that's why like I got confused up, and I never catch materiality, and he always talking about materiality. Now I remember after the fact, going concern, but then like in the test, like you
saw I leave that blank. What that was?
When I go back and look, as if I think a company could be able to meet their financial obligations in the future. But when you hear that term going concern and you have all kind of confusion going off, that whole terminology is throw you off. But materiality, I know some material or something like that, but I could never get it to put it in a short context. I could never get that right.
Well, I know for what I put was materiality is just a threshold that the auditors would use to determine
you put plenty.
What is a misstatement, what isn't, because I can't remember exactly how I worded, but I described what immaterial was too. Basically, if something is material, then it influences the outcome of the audit in a way.
Right, I know that, but guess what? Like I can't put it in context, so I couldn't put it together to write it. I that blank, and I leave going concern blank.
I leave that blank. And the thing is, you would just ask that right before.
Remember, I said I gotta never get going
concern blank too.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I don't remember even going over that term.
I remember
I remember
I Googled plenty stuff. I Google to help me understand. Even with materiality, I Google that and I still ain't. That's like, hey, I ain't a blonde, right? But I still ain't get it down packet where I could write 2 sentences. Because there's a lot. And let me tell you what cost me to some of them stuff I did just read over that morning, but while I was getting ready, I had on YouTube and it was explaining some stuff in simple terms with beans in the jar. Population and all that.
You mean, what is the difference between what is it, test checking and audit sampling?
Child test checking, I couldn't remember that too much. I might get that wrong, but sampling is when you pull in samples. For example, like if 5 of us in a class, right? You might pull 2 people out to use a sample to get a basic understanding of the whole population of the class, for example. Now, maybe
right. So what's the difference between that and test checking?
Right. I ain't sure, but test checking they're a little tricky, man. But I know that's what sampling is. Sampling is. So if you pull 1 out of 5, you might get a true picture of actually what the population is with 1. Not even maybe 2, but maybe if you pull 3, you understand?
Because I know
because you're not gonna use the entire population of 5. You're just gonna pull some samples from it. But you want to pull samples from touching on everything that has to do with that population.
I know that one, but I was trying to figure out, but if that's what audit sampling is, then what exactly is test checking? Because I know test checking is like where they try to do it to save time, and they don't actually go through all of the transactions. They just go through some. So to do the same thing, they kind of like get a representation of the whole population by just checking a few stuff. So that it was more like the opposite of routine checking. But I put the same thing for audit sampling that I did for test checking. Or I don't know if audit sampling is like a form of test checking.
Yeah, but
I do not know. But remember in the beginning when I said I noticed with auditing, everything is come back to the same thing. Remember I made that comment weeks ago?
Yeah, somebody did say that in the class. Say this is the same thing.
That was me. But see, like I had like so much going on, especially at work, a lot going on at work. And I was under pressure. So sometimes my head never used to be clear.
Me too, same.
But that was a lot of information. And I was like, Jay, I didn't even want to talk to Mr. Martin. What do you name?
Wilkinson.
Mr. Wilkinson. That's why I said I know I feel that test.
I think you feel it. I think he said, because he said the reason why, even though I didn't know some stuff, the reason why is because he say it don't have to be exactly word for word. He said as long as we kind of like get the concept.
Yeah, well, I guess we're gonna get see. But he late today. He must have taken test today.
You must be finishing up marking the last exam.
What are you gonna say? How your case study going? Coming along?
I didn't get to that yet. Just so you say,
I gotta start. Like I want to start. Like I had between work and personal life and extracurricular activities and stuff like that. Plus trying to crunch this class in. Yeah.
They trying to show me now how to be an internal auditor at work, and now I got to take a bunch of courses, but trying to do that at work and then coming here to do it, it is be hard. I ain't even gonna lie.
But trust me, and that's what I working on the team and the administration. We're doing some internal auditing, so it's a lot. It's a lot paper. That's like compliance, bunch of paper. It's stuck with paper, and you got to be digging up stuff. So it's exhausting. So a lot of times when I come home in the evening, and I pick up my book to read, I be reading. I don't even know when I fall asleep.
Real.
Like when I catch myself this morning, I fell asleep. When I caught myself this morning, it was like 4:10 a.m.
Wow. Mr.
So
Wilkins,
hopefully, yeah.
can reach it. So it's only 6 of us in the class? Because it was only 6 of us there.
Yeah, I think one person would have had to travel that weekend. I'm not sure if they travel or not. I don't. Yeah, I think it's be like 6, 7 people in now. Hopefully,
Oh boy, I thought he would have
Yes,
done 10 of that, man, because that's only 6 papers to mark. I was very eager because I wanted to know how I did, because I was scared. Like,
I don't even want. I don't even want to think about that right now. After the
I
exam, I
actually
gone home and
our
I
work paid
slept
for
and
that.
I dismissed the whole exams.
Our work paid for that. So if we don't if we don't pass that,
I have to pay
I
for this
gotta pay for
myself. So I need to pass.
exactly. So we ain't pass that, and all right. And that's so much information just the first 6 weeks.
And the only reason why we didn't finish internal controls, I think internal control, because that's something we have to deal with on a regular basis, might be a little easier for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I think I gotta start making my notes and my questions for when he come at us, because this could be on the final exam. Even like we even inside like in like face to face, we can have like little small little tests and things.
Yeah.
Test checking consists of selecting and checking a portion of the transaction selected by the auditor.
Selected by the
Right,
auditor.
that's what they're talking about.
Hold on,
Scientific
read that again. What you say? What it is?
Test checking consists of selecting and checking a portion of transactions selected by the auditor. The salient features of test checking are scientific estimation process, coverage of material, full coverage over period of time, surprise element. I forget all of that. All that going at my head.
That is not what I put on that exam.
That's a whole last module 5. I didn't get this last thing down, but I remember it now. I don't know if he'll give us bonus question on the finals. Only bonus question we need is what is an auditor? What is auditing? That's it.
Yeah, I know that one. I know that one word for word.
I probably will give a bonus question on the final exam.
Mr. Wilkinson.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Mr. Wilkinson. Everybody here is very nervous.
You sent us home to drink that night. I had to go home and drink a whole 40 ounce.
No, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, it was that bad.
No way.
Too much. I had TMI, too much information in my head, I blank out.
Now, let me ask you a question.
I was getting confused.
I want you to be honest. Did anybody cram for this exam?
Cram?
Did anybody? Pardon me?
Cram. C-R-A-M.
I won't call it cram, but it was a lot of information to retain. And with a lot of other stuff going on, like it's trying to remember and it's getting confused. And something seems similar, like you ever have too much information in your head till you mix up like tongue salad. I couldn't cram that. There's too much information to cram.
Yeah, you couldn't just
couldn't really cram it, because that for me, like some of them terms, like a lot of them I had to Google. So when I used to go through my notes, I used to take my time to try to understand it. But like even like going concern like that, I forget what that was. Materiality, I never don't care. Even when I Google that, I couldn't put that in two sentences or a sentence.
When you Google it, that was before the exam?
Like during, like when you're going through your notes, the process of going through it to try to understand.
So if you were not clear on it, why didn't you just send me a note and then I would have made it clear? See? That's really what I meant. If you get stuck, just drop a note, make a call, send an email, and I'll make it quite simple for you. Because sometimes when you're reading stuff on Google, the way they say it, they don't clarify it either, depending on your knowledge level. And so you need it to be said a certain way so you can understand it better.
Yeah, well, that materiality in it for me.
That's okay. That's only one point.
concerned, I didn't know what it was, but I just forget it. I
Ma'am,
can't
going
because
concern.
I think that that term going concern like that when you didn't have so much info that like throw me left.
In
There's no
exam,
good.
I remember hearing your voice talking about it, but I couldn't remember what that was.
Materiality stuck in my head with Mr. Wilkinson voice, but I couldn't. I that you know, materiality. Yeah, but I couldn't remember.
Does anybody remember now what materiality is?
I still can't put it in the sentence. Like that one, I ain't get that one yet. I could get it, but I can't get that one yet.
I know what it is, but to say like put it like in a prose form is difficult. Like I know like if something is material, that means it like influence the auditor's outcome or whatever, or if it doesn't, then it's immaterial. And then
Right.
auditors could like set a materiality threshold. Like I know exactly what it is, but
To
I don't
see
know
if
how
it
to
could, right, to
explain
see if it will be relevant to the audit. Something like
What you just
like
said
it's a
is,
misstatement. Like if something is like a misstatement.
no
listen,
materiality must be something that auditor is use, but immateriality or whatever it is when the information ain't relevant to the audit being conducted. Something.
Rosalie,
Mr. Wilkinson, a quick question. Anybody get that answer right? You
did
and you
anybody,
in marketing. Pardon me?
did anybody answer the question?
Yeah, the materiality question.
I know I answer that.
You didn't answer it?
I tried to answer it, but I'm pretty sure I was wrong the way I answered it. I tried.
And we shall soon see, because I am busily marking all kinds of interesting answers as we speak.
So tell me something, Mr.
You
Wilkinson.
mean to say I created the class? I don't get embarrassed.
So
No,
Mr.
I'm not gonna say
Wilkinson,
No,
hi.
a
private.
quick question. In
Mhm.
terms of curve grading, let's say nobody gets the answer correct. Would you think about omitting the question?
The curve, the
Oh,
influence
that's
curve.
funny.
Your point is well taken, Danielle. I will certainly keep it in mind. Yeah. Going back to Rosalie, though. Rosalie, did you answer the question on materiality?
Yes, I did.
Good. Then what's because that answer you gave me should get you the points you need for that question.
Yeah, that's how I answer it. But like, I don't know. I feel like you explain it more. Like I wasn't able to explain it how you explain it.
So let me tell you a secret. Of course not. You're not expected to explain it the way I explained it. You're expected to explain it the best way you understood it. And generally, if it's in the vicinity of what it is and what I said, you will get credit. I don't expect you to say it exactly the way I did, nor the text, unless you're one of those people who can remember to say it exactly that way. But it doesn't have to be exactly. All right.
Mhm.
What you said to the class and to me a few moments ago is pretty much what materiality is all about.
Okay.
So some of you might end up doing better than you think.
So when will we get our grades?
Soon and very soon, I'm grading like hell. Between now and the weekend, you should be getting an email.
Oh, Miss Wilkinson, I've been so nervous, man. I say, oh, why? Then when you didn't come online early
I
today,
write the
we was
whole
like, man,
exam
Mr.
off.
Wilkinson, and he's so disappointed in us. He ain't even want to sign on.
I say I write the whole exam off.
No. Please don't jump the gun. Wait until you get the results. You might be more surprised than you think. We always feel like we come in out of examinations. I felt that way many, many times. And most of the times when I felt that way, I did far better than I thought I would. So do not jump the bridge. Don't jump out the window. Don't commit suicide. Don't hit the children. None of that stuff. Just wait and be patient. Remember, that is only a part of your semester. You still have a final exam. You have a paper. You have other points to be added. All of that has to be added in before you come up with a final grade. So do not panic yet. All right? Not at all. Not at all. All right. And of course, I told you that the final exam will not be cumulative. So the final will be starting with what we start with today, which is internal controls. And wherever we end up, that is all you will be tested on for your final examination. All right. All right. So I have a few questions before we get started. Let me ask the class, what is the meaning of auditing? What does auditing mean? Anyone?
Auditing is the scientific examination of the books to give a fair view of of an establishment or some business financial record.
Hey, couldn't put it better myself. That's the point. If you put that in your answer, then that's an easy points. Go on to the next one. What is an interim audit? Anyone?
An interim audit done between two audit periods. It's something else.
Is it an audit done in a certain accounting period for a certain specific purpose?
Less than a
Yeah.
year. For
Yeah, a
specific purpose.
combination. Somebody said an audit that's done between auditing periods, yes, and for specific purposes, yes. Any version of that that makes sense, you got credit. Okay, as long as you didn't say Joe Biden should be president, you should get credit for any version of that. All right, number 3. We talked about materialities, and some persons came up with a pretty good definition of materiality, and some persons may have come up with something they thought wasn't right, might be right. So we'll see. I'm surprised to hear people got stuck on going concern. It's really simply whether the company will continue on in business. That's all it is. I don't know what the big deal was. Okay, I heard somebody trying to. Yeah, that's it. Nothing more.
Yeah, I just forget it.
Yeah, that happens. Test checking. I heard somebody trying to define it. Test checking, that whatever was said was pretty much correct. Taking a sample and checking that totally, some version of that. That's correct. What about an audit sample? What is that?
I'm sorry, I write test checking for audit sample. Now I confused.
Fern, who defined audit sampling earlier?
Yeah, who defined it earlier? What is an audit sample? It's anyone?
Wouldn't that be taken just what I'm saying, from a range from any financial records from between like 100 and 500, and you just pull them and just research and audit those particular accounts or records?
Or is
Okay,
it
that's a good start.
or is it
Go ahead.
the audit of a small selection of transactions with the same basically the same transactions instead of similar thing?
Now, is that actually the sample or is that something else? That is a correct explanation. Taking a sample of what?
Population. I use that word, that's right.
Yes, if you use population, then you are definitely correct. Okay, an audit sample is taking a sample of the overall population and testing it. That's it.
So,
So
Mr.
some of you-
Wilkinson, the question that I
Uh-huh.
asked him earlier is, so what is really the difference between test checking and audit sampling, or is audit sampling like a form of test checking?
Some people believe it can be used interchangeably, but really test checking is taking a section of a specific category, not the population, of a specific category and testing it in detail. The sample, on the other hand, is taking a particular portion of the entire population of, let's say, for example, you're checking the cash account. Audit testing is like taking the high balances in the cash account and testing them, all the high balances. That would be considered testing. Audit sampling would be taking a number of accounts out of the entire general ledger population and testing them. So there's a subtle difference between the two. Okay.
Okay.
Sometimes, though, people use them interchangeably, but they're not exactly the same. They have similar
So-
characteristics.
But they both have the same risk from the sample risk, which is basically you
That's why I
could
get
get an opinion
confused.
about the sample that you get, which would be different from the opinion you get if you reviewed the entire population, test checking and audit sample and have that same risk.
Very good. I thought you guys weren't learning anything
We
from
learn,
the
but it's just the way to explain it.
No,
Right, that's what
listen,
it is. How
listen to me. Listen to me. Don't try, it's like learning a foreign language. A lot of people make the mistake when they're learning a foreign language of trying to speak exactly the way foreigners speak the language. That's foolishness. You can't. It takes years and years and a lifetime to do that, especially if you haven't grown up in that environment. So what am I saying? You don't have to be perfect in this. All you need is to just understand the basic concepts, and that will help you to get started. And then you get better and better over time as you use it and hear it and involve yourself in it. That's the whole point. Stop seeking perfection in 6 weeks. It doesn't flicking work that way.
Okay. Hey, Mr.
See my point?
Wilkinson. Mr.
Right.
Wilkinson. I ain't gonna
Right.
lie, when I was in that test, right? I only get to hear your voice now saying flicking this and flicking. I was like, I was just overplaying at my head to try to remember.
That's my point. And I say that specifically for emphasis so you don't forget. Don't try to be perfect immediately.
Well,
It doesn't work that way.
very fair and lenient because they don't often do that, not especially not at best. You better be on point. You know, they some days great hard.
That don't worry about it. The important thing is after the examinations are over, you have the knowledge and you have the experience and you have the interaction and all that kind of stuff to carry with you to use whenever the circumstances require it. That's the important thing. Yes, you want to pass the class, of course. And it is my expectation that everybody will pass this class. I don't really think about anything else, okay? But more importantly is what you carry with you after the examinations are over and the classroom sessions are done, okay? For sure. So don't worry about it. From what I heard, folks are basically on track with a whole lot of this stuff. Let me just pick something out before we go on for the record. Can anybody remember 2 limitations of auditing?
Having to rely on third party.
Inherit and
Yeah, having to rely on third parties. That's a limitation. One more.
so it wasn't the inherit and no, it wasn't those two answers.
What's the second one?
I don't know, child.
Inherent limitations of auditing. Could we have
I
put
thought it
that?
was the inherent and external limitations.
Well, that's
Like
something
the
to check.
inherit, and then when you explain, I explain up. Like
So
the auditors are only able to draw a reasonable conclusion. That's an inherent. No,
well, that
wasn't-
would be a no, that would be a limitation as well. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So you guys are pretty much on the right track. Okay. Let me just pick one more since we're on the
Well, I
road.
was wrong. So I say auditors cannot prevent fraud. I had
That
to
is a
stop the place that night.
No, that is a limitation because they cannot prevent fraud. Okay?
Right. But I thought you had it break up into 2 different limitations. One is inherent and one is external. So where she said it does not detect fraud, that was an external limitation.
Well,
I don't know, but it was so much information, and that's why I tell you I was getting all confused up because, like, you know, just writing the right thing, but like it's just like we know the stuff, Mr. Wilkinson, but like it was a lot of information trying to figure out exactly where to apply it.
of course, all students feel that way in different degrees, and depending on how well you study and prepare, because some people study and prepare differently from others. Some people spend a lot of time preparing, other people spend the average amount of time studying, and then some people spend little time studying. So depending on your commitment, you get different results. But let's see what happens. Let's not worry about it. Okay? we'll see what happens. All right. So moving along from that bloody midterm, which you seem to have been pretty much familiar with anyway, let me take my register and then we can begin our discussion on internal controls, a whole new world of auditing. Remember, at the end of the day, what you carry with you afterwards is really what matters. All right. Now, somebody's mic is open, so it means I have to shout a little louder. I don't know whose mic it is. Okay. Of course, when you're ready to ask a question, debate something, whatever, open the mic and start talking. Okay? Please, by all means. All right. Remember, in my class, you can start at any time. You can jump in at any time. You don't need my permission to do that. Okay? All right. Now, when I call your names, I want you to answer for 2 occasions. If you were at the examination last week, say yes. And if you're here tonight, say yes. So that should be 2 yeses. How's that? Let's see how that bit of creativity will work. Danelle.
Present, but I took the exam on Saturday.
I know your situation, so that's a yes, yes. Okay. India. India? Where did India go? Okay. She must have gotten knocked out because I saw her earlier. Okay. Gretchen.
Yes, yes.
Okay, yes, yes, for Gretchen. Great. Does anybody know which week we're in, by the way? Today's week number what?
7.
7 already. How time flies. Rosalie.
Here, and I was at the exam.
Okay, yes, yes. Okay. Ebonique.
Yes and yes.
Great, Ebonique, yes, yes. Did anybody have a chance to start reading, looking over the internal control chapter, or you just said, the hell with it, I'll leave it until tonight?
I didn't read. I ain't gonna lie, I didn't. I was traumatized from the exam.
Couldn't have been that bad, Rosie. I can't, the way I grade the papers is I don't grade one paper completely and then put the grade. I grade by question. So I'll grade all of question 1 for everybody, all of question 2. And then when I'm done grading all of each question for everybody, then I'll go back and total the grades to see what each student got. So I'll see what had you so traumatized. All right. Ebony was, yeah. Karen. Where did Karen go anyway? Bloody Bank to the Bahamas. Okay. Did I leave off anybody's name?
Me, I just come back. Sorry, I had to do something.
Yeah, okay. There you are.
Mr. Wilkinson, I like how you said Bank to the Bahamas just now.
Oh, I was talking. Where's Karen, by the way, India?
She don't work in my area anymore. She works at a branch now, so I'm not too sure.
Yeah, that's probably what happened. That new branch is driving her nuts. Because I don't see her in our session tonight, so something has gone down in that new branch. Work. All right, we'll see what happens. Okay, if you do have an opportunity to touch base with her, let her know that her lecturer inquired and she should feel free to call me if she needs to say what's going on. Okay, India? If you get a moment to do that. Yeah. All right, so let's get cracking with tonight's lecture on internal controls. I don't know if anybody in this class has ever heard about. By the way, did I give you guys like a research paper or something, a case to do?
Yeah, we have a case study. On
Yeah.
internal
How's that
controls.
going?
The chapter 5, because we didn't receive any notes for the next modules.
Oh, you didn't?
No, not as yet.
Yeah, but internal control was the last one on the same one that he sent earlier. That was the last module. So he hasn't sent a new one yet.
Okay, so I need to send you guys the remaining modules for the second half. But you should have chapter 5, which is internal control.
Right.
Okay. I need to make a note. I thought I'd sent all of them. I need to send you the remaining ones that you will be responsible for. So when you get up late at night and can't sleep, you can pick up my notes and enjoy reading them. All right. Okay, send remaining chapters. That'll be chapter 6 to, I'll see how that goes. All right. Anybody familiar with the expression internal control at all? Ever heard that word? Ever saw it?
Yeah, it was in the other modules. So I mean, it wasn't, but it was in the other modules. So I just basically but make my own definition of it.
What did you come up with in a nutshell? Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. Stop trying to be perfect. Just let something come out.
Okay. For me, internal controls are basically the measures that businesses put in place to mitigate risks.
Yes, yes, yes. If there's anybody in this room who doesn't understand that simple expression of internal control, speak now or raise a question anytime. Okay? There's no forever hold your peace in my class. You can raise it anytime you want. But that's basically in a nutshell how internal control works. By the way, despite all the stress of preparing for the midterm exam and fighting through the exam and attempting to answer all the questions and all the frustration that goes with it, that is really part of what makes you better at what you're going to be in a particular subject like this. Whether you realize it or not, during the semester, you'll find that long after the semester is done, that a whole lot of this stuff will stay in your head, will come up and you'll understand it, will make references, you'll get it, and all this kind of stuff. And even if you have to go back to your notes and check something, say, wait a minute, let me check that. Somewhere along the way, a lot of this stuff is going to be very useful in one form or another, even though you may not see it entirely now. Okay, for sure. All right. So internal control then is this thing that we have inside the organization. This animal that we create within the organization is policy of some kind in order to mitigate against the risk. And we'll see what those risks are pretty soon and why these internal control issues are actually come up in the first place. Now, we were told at the very beginning of our reading that this concept of internal control is a very important area of the auditing process. And you're given a little definition right at the beginning to try to explain what internal controls are. Some other variations will come up, but at the end of the day, they will all mean pretty much the same. Notice at the very beginning of your notes, it says it is a number of checks and controls, see, checks and controls, which your businesses uses to ensure what? Efficient and economic working. What does that mean? If something comes into the warehouse, an internal control measure would be for you to have somebody at the door checking everything going in. Now, why would that be a necessary internal control anyway? Have somebody at the door of the warehouse checking the goods before they go in. Why would you want to do that as a company?
To keep track of inventory, to keep account of inventory.
Absolutely. And why is that necessary?
Well, if you keep count of inventory, it makes it less easy for persons to steal.
Absolutely. It is a known fact that food stores and other businesses lose millions of dollars every year from employee theft alone. And many of these organizations have internal controls in place. Employees just find ways around them. That's what's interesting. So again, these controls are designed to minimize and mitigate against these kinds of losses. Imagine if there were no internal controls in place, what the level the losses would be. With internal controls, we still experience losses, but we experience them to a lesser extent. And notice it allows for efficient and economic working. Efficient meaning you don't have to worry about the stress of pilferage to a great extent and significant losses. And economically, you save a lot of money because you can avoid theft and loss of assets. Okay? It is a critical tool of management. It's a tool that management uses in its performance program to try to measure how well the company is being run. These internal controls are built into the system, and they should be. Constant cross-checking. I don't know if any of you work in organizations where if somebody signs the document, somebody has to check it, somebody has to verify it, somebody has to approve it. Anybody in that kind of environment?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so. Because if you work in an environment where those things are not happening, dog eat that environment's lunch. Because people are taking stuff with controls. It's just like a jealous husband. He might be watching his wife, he thinks 24 hours a day. And that's his way of trying to maintain control over what she's doing. Except that, can he really watch it 24 hours a day, ladies?
No, because he got to go to the bathroom for 25 minutes. So she can 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that one. I didn't have that one before. He has to go to the bathroom, and the 5 minutes that he's there, all hell can break loose if that is her intent or his, either side of the fence. So yes, these controls. So how does he mitigate it? By not trying to watch it 24 hours a day. What he has to say to her is try to like say, if you do something and I discover it, I shall leave you. I shall divorce you. I shall present it before the court that you, and when I say her, I mean his or her. I'm just picking on the chicks today. And all that. So, and then just leave it, go to work and assume that all is well. Okay? That's a kind of control mechanism that you put in place. And so organizations have all these checks and balances just to try to make sure that they try to ensure that they can keep any losses to a minimum. Okay? The more complex the business, the bigger it is in size, the more difficult it is to control. No question about it. Okay? Getting correct information, making sure everybody stays honest, making sure everybody's doing their check and balance systems is not easy to do. That's why organizations have different levels within the organization. You have senior management, middle management, supervisors, and so on. All designed to try to watch and make sure and manage these internal controls if they exist in the first place. They also exist internal controls to check to make sure that everything is being done accurately so that the information that goes into the accounting general ledger is reliable. Remember, if too many errors are made and nobody's checking it, to find out what those errors are potentially, in addition to theft, that's not the only problem organizations have. They also have the problem with incorrect information going into the general ledger, which leads to incorrect information being reported in financial statements, which means a big problem if it is discovered to be so, particularly for senior management. Okay? So this thing about internal controls is a very serious thing. When internal controls are being implemented in any firm, that is when you find and begin to discover the weaknesses in your firm or any area of your life where you're trying to implement internal controls. Let me ask you guys something. Usually when we think about internal controls, we think about a business. Do you think that a church needs to have internal control in place?
Yeah, fiscal
Yes,
offering.
absolutely.
Why?
More than anywhere else.
Money involved.
I know, but that's God's money. Would people bother with it?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I'll pay all the damages and both.
Yes, just as the demons are on the board. Remember I said in the first half of the semester, most of the fraud and crap that goes on of any significance occurs at the board level, not at the middle and definitely not the bottom. Yet, we fire the teller, beat somebody to death for taking 20 stinking dollars. Not that they should take it. I'm not saying they should take it. I'm not saying I condone not taking it. But the real culprits are not at the bottom. The real culprits that run off at millions and millions, some of them don't even get caught. And sometimes when they do get caught, they never go to prison somehow. Okay? So what they do at the top is 10 times, gazillion times worse than what occurs down the line. And oftentimes, even, as we said, even in the church, the real problems occur at the top far more often than they occur at the bottom. Because who's at the bottom? The membership, the lowly people. I don't know where lowly came in, because the membership really should be what? The head. Because who, just like politicians, the persons in the church are supposed to be there to do what? Serve whom? Anyone knows? Serve whom? The members. Just like politicians are supposed to serve the people. But we have mixed it up. And so the internal control mechanism, see, in a democracy, the internal control mechanism is this. The people have the power, the people vote, and the people speak through their votes. And therefore, the politicians are not your masters, they are your servants. That's how the internal control is supposed to work. But in practice, like so many other internal control systems, it fails. Same thing in the church. The bishop and the deacons and everybody are supposed to be serving the membership. Instead, the membership are in fact serving them for some strange reason. And anybody who raises the issue, they start looking at you funny. But the point I'm making is internal controls, the concept of it is everywhere. That's really the point I'm making at this stage of the game. The better your internal controls, those things that you put in place to mitigate your risk, to improve your accuracy and to minimize losses, the better you implement them, the less you will lose and the better your business or your organization or your home or whatever it is will work. Okay? Let's go to the home for a moment, internal controls. We talked about the business, we talked about the church. Let's go to the other institution, the home. Without controls in the home, we all know what will happen. Everybody will be doing their own thing. And once everybody starts doing their own thing with no kinds of controls in place to manage the process, all hell breaks loose 99% of the time in one form or another. So, internal controls, this animal is everywhere and it should be everywhere because the objective of this animal is a very positive and good one. The only problem is institutions and organizations and others oftentimes find themselves busily violating internal controls to the detriment of the company, to the detriment of the institution, whatever that institution might be, and of course to the detriment of the country, because countries are supposed to have internal controls in place too. But oftentimes they fail for one reason or another. And so the treasury loses money, public money is stolen, public money is abused, all because the internal controls have been violated. This internal controls thing is deep when you really think about it. Okay? For sure. Now, we do have a definition of internal control. So everybody see the definition by the AICPA? Everybody see that?
You mean the definition that you have here on the paper?
Yeah, module 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. What does AICPA mean?
AICPA. Where is that?
American
American
Go
American.
ahead.
American
American,
Institute of Certified Public Accountants.
yes. The American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. That is the American version of the professional board which certifies CPAs around the world, whoever they might be. Okay? There is a British version of that, there's a Canadian version of that, and there are other versions of that around the world. Some are reputable and others are not. Certainly the AICPA, the Canadian version, the British version are considered to be the most reputable in the world. And then when you start getting to other countries like Africa, Asia, and places like that, where they do funny stuff, I'm not saying that they're not doing it right, but nobody really knows oftentimes what they're doing in those countries. It's hard to get good information from Eastern countries for some strange reason. Doesn't mean that all the information is bad. I'm not saying that. It's just that it's hard to get good information. Okay? All right, so the ICPA, and I kind of threw that out there. So if you go to work or go to a function or go somewhere and I stress or something, and you hear the discussion come up, now it would mean something to you as opposed to last week when it meant nothing. Okay? And this is the other beauty about education. It's not just to pass your examinations. You learn a whole lot of interesting other crap, not crap, you know what I mean, along the way, if you are so inclined. Okay? So, how did the AICPA define internal control? Anyone? Can you say what the definition is exactly that is in the text?
I define internal controls as a plan of management and all the coordinate methods and measures adopted within a business to safeguard its assets, check the accuracy and the reliability of its accounting data, promote operational efficiency, and encourage adherence to prescribed managerial policies. A system of internal controls extends beyond those matters which relate directly to the function of the accounting and financial department.
Very interesting. That's a very convoluted definition. Uh, do you need to know it by heart? No, of course not. But if you're the kind of person who can learn stuff by heart and it sticks, be my guest. But you're not expected to be able to do that. Okay? But it is very involved. And if you start breaking it down into components, we can talk for a long time on each of the components. And to some extent, we will discuss a great deal of these components that comprise the internal control process. But let's begin at the beginning. First of all, internal controls should be a plan of management. In other words, anything you manage, the first thing you should ask yourself is, do we have the relevant controls in place? That's it. I don't care what it is you're managing. Okay? If you're managing a car lot, the question you should ask yourself, do we have the relevant controls in place? Or can anybody come into this car lot and do whatever they want? See? That's what internal controls are all about. And if the answer is no, then why? What are the rules? See? Internal controls, they're everywhere. What is the plan of management? That is it. And the plan of management is to ensure that there are internal controls in place. Now, why do we have them? We said it before, to safeguard company assets. That's only one reason. Check for accuracy. That's another reason. Check for reliability, specifically in the accounting information. Because if the information in the general ledger is unreliable, then who can trust it? And then the auditors come in and they have a harder time for conducting the audit because they can't trust the internal control process because it's weak. And when it's weak, that means the auditors have to do more work longer, charge more money for the audit, etc. Very interesting thing. Promote efficiency within the firm and ensure that everybody's following the rules of the company's policies and procedures. And I think we all understand policies and procedures. Those are the things that management and the company requires us to respond to and adhere to at all times. And if we want to go the other way, we go at our own peril, or we should get permission to do so. Also, the important thing to remember about internal controls is the last sentence or point, that it extends beyond matters which relate to the accounting and financial departments. Because a lot of times, for some strange reason, people feel in organizations that internal controls are only for accounting and finance department. It certainly is not. Whether people come to work regularly or not, or take too much time off saying they're sick, that is an internal control problem. Because if a bunch of people keep calling in sick often, then that's going to affect operational efficiency. Then other people have to come over to fill in for them. Then work lags behind, and everything is affected. So that's an HR matter. Has nothing to do with accounting or finance, but it is an internal control issue that needs to be rectified. And so, what kind of internal control might management put in place? Well, if you're late more than twice a month, we are going to do something to you. If you're sick more than X times per year, we're going to do something. That doesn't mean people cannot be sick. That's not what I mean. Everything is within the context of the situation. Okay, just making the point that internal controls do not stop only with accounting and finance, like many people still think for some reason. Okay? The Institute of Chartered Accountants in Wales, England and Wales, they have their little definition as well. I wonder, it seems to be a little smaller definition than the AICPA. But it looks like it's trying to say the same thing. Is it trying to say the same thing, anyone? The British version, is it saying the same thing as the American version, the internal control definition?
Basically.
Yeah, basically. Financial and otherwise established by management for the business to conduct business in an orderly fashion, safeguard assets and secure them, accuracy and reliability. Yeah, seems pretty much the same, as it should be, because it was the Americans who adopted the British accounting system in the first place. They just changed some stuff around so that it could be American, because now that they're powerful and rich, they don't want to be identified with their forefathers who were British, by the way. All right, did you know that other than the Indians that they met in North America, that the British were the founding original settlers in the United States? Did you know that?
Before Native Indians, British were there.
In
No.
the what?
Other than the native Indians, the British were the original settlers in the United States. Founding fathers were British.
No, I didn't know that.
No, me though.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. If you talk to an American, because they're so American now, they try to not say that the original American who settled was a British person, but they were. Okay. They came over to North America because they wanted to escape persecution and taxes and the right to religion in the UK. That's why they left and came to Canada and the United States. In case you were just curious about that stuff. All right. And so the Americans, since the founding fathers were British, they adopted a lot of things British originally, and then eventually started changing things up and calling it American. And there are many things that are uniquely American as well. But it's important to remember your roots. That's the thing. All right. So now that we have this big fat definition of what internal controls are, and remember, don't let the paragraph scare you. Just break it down into simple, manageable parts. Like instead of trying to remember word for word, just write down a note form that the internal control has to do with what? Safeguarding assets, checking accuracy, reliability. See? Promoting policies and procedures. And then you do that, then you have your definition. So if I ask you in the final exam, define internal control, you say, man, it's a piece of cake. I can almost remember that without even thinking about that, just from the class. That's a key way to look at it. Deal with it in bites. Don't take a big chunk and try to swallow all at one time. That will make you miserable. Okay. That's why I always tell students, read, stay on top of your reading, make notes early, make your notes simple but clear, And then when you get into examination, you remember them better, and it'll be easier to study, and you just kind of connect the dots. You study techniques, try it, see if it works. All right. What are the objectives of the internal control process? 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. Um, some of the key ones that I want you to be aware of. Objective number 1. Internal controls are put in place to minimize, remember, if not completely eliminate, waste and inefficiencies within the business and to safeguard the assets of the business. So that's, you could kind of remember that without thinking. Eliminate waste and safeguard assets. If you don't remember like efficiencies in business, don't worry about it. The hell with it. Remember things like waste and safeguarding assets. That's it. That's one objective down pat without stress. You save all that other fancy stuff for like when you're writing papers and sending in a report somewhere, not for examination. Not that examinations answers should just be like 2 dogs and a cat, but the point is you have to be smart about it. All right, objective number 2, to ensure not just accuracy, but a high degree of accuracy and reliability. In other words, the more accurate the information is within the company, the more reliable the accounting data will be, and therefore the more efficient the operation will be run, because you have a great deal of confidence that these controls make sure that information going into the system, financial or otherwise, is correct. Okay? So that's the second objective. Third objective, to measure how well policies and procedures are being implemented. Simple as that. Do you have any controls in place to make sure that the policy is being implemented? Yes. The supervisor or the manager, when a staff comes to the situation, excuse me, did you do this, this, and this before you brought it to me? That's the policy. Oh my God, I'll be back. Okay. That's kind of controls you'll see with regards to policy implementation. And then the fourth objective, again, to evaluate efficiency, to highlight any weaknesses in the business. So if you don't remember all the stuff, evaluate the efficiency of performances, don't worry about it. If you do, let it rip. If you don't, just say, hey, one of the objectives is to highlight weaknesses in the company. That's it. You still get credit because that's the key point. Highlighting weaknesses creates efficiencies in performance. But if you don't remember all those fancy words, like, so what? Go to the one you can remember. It highlights weaknesses. Remember, examinations are not just studying information to put stuff back. Sometimes you have to use some technique. It's called examination technique to help you along. All right. So now that we know the definition and we know the objectives, then we can look at some interesting aspects of internal control. Two of them, right? Two of them. We call them forms of internal control. And the reason why we have them is because these two forms in particular help us to ensure that records and information are correct. And by being correct, they become reliable. It's just like, for example, if you does anybody know anybody in this class and in your life who's a constant liar? Anybody knows any constant liars, like people who lie all the time? No one? I'm the only one?
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Yeah, they lie more than they should. Let me put it that way.
Lie for nothing.
Yeah, lie for nothing. That's the worst of the worst. That you see, if you're lying to get out of death or adultery or something like that, you're like, oh, maybe, even though it's still a lie. Still a lie, but just lying, like we say in the Bahamas, lying for lying's sake. That's a big old problem. Okay. So persons who lie a lot, that is a major internal control weakness. Okay, just like what we're talking about in business. Why? Because once you become known as being a liar, then nobody can rely on what? Anybody? If you become known as a
That
liar,
poison
people
word.
generally,
You're not reliable.
yeah, people are not going to rely on anything you say. Same thing in the firm. If the internal controls are weak and are not there, are not there at all, or they're weak, or they're not being adhered to, then it creates what we call an unreliable environment. So we don't know whether the information going into the financial statements is correct or not. We don't know if the data that we're balancing and going into other areas of the company are correct or not. We don't know if the persons who are responsible for reporting what's going on in the manufacturing warehouse, etc., is correct or not. We don't know if the person who's in charge of the warehouse is telling the truth about what's in there, about the inventory count, about minus the 17 cases that were took home, whatever it is. Has to be correct and implemented in order for it to be reliable, because until it's reliable, the system, it cannot be trusted. That is why, and that is how it becomes part of the audit process, as you'll see. If auditors work in an environment and the controls are deemed to be strong, auditors can relax a little bit, not entirely, just a bit, in terms of the extent to which they'll check things. They'll probably do more test checking and less sampling.
Can I ask a
However,
question about internal
certainly,
control? Is this let me know if this is a weak internal control or not. If you have two of the same persons checking the money every time it comes into the establishment, they are responsible for recording how much they receive or whatever, and they are responsible for putting it in the vault and dishing it out to the tellers, but it's just the same two people who are friends. Is that considered like a weak internal control, or because of the fact that they have to fill out the forms, it's not really that big of an internal control, it's not really that big of a risk?
you know, Rosalie, uh, you have no idea, you have no idea how important that very same question is, because many firms continue to suffer from that whole concept. That same concept that you mentioned. Here's what I mean. Typically, a good internal control system, especially when it comes to monitoring cash, requires a minimum of two persons to handle cash together. So if you have an environment where two persons are handling cash together, then we tend to say that that creates a stronger internal control system. Now, what happens is we have a green-eyed monster that from time to time will invade the internal control system even though it's strong. So having two persons instead of one strengthens the internal control. Clearly having three persons is a bit excessive, but it strengthens it even more. Makes it harder for other things to happen. But typically two persons together is considered acceptable internal control. However, the green-eyed monster that comes along sometimes is that they are friends. And so when people start to get friendly, they sometimes start planning things together. For example, they plan
Illusion.
to go, well, somebody said it early, but yeah, well, yeah, I wanted to say something a little more romantic, like they start planning to go to lunch together first and to discuss how they're going to collude. And that is the green-eyed monster. That's the part of internal control that is hard to control. One of the ways companies try to control collusion uh, in that particular context is to keep changing the people regularly. In other words, don't let folks hang out together for too long. We even do this in a branch setting. If a branch manager has been at a branch for too long, organization will say we need to switch the managers around so nobody gets too comfortable. Because human nature being, not everybody, let's get that clear. Not everybody in the world is up to no good, but far too many people are. And as a result of that, we have all these things that we need to learn and understand: audits, internal controls, audit classes like this one. whatever the case might be, so that we could try to mitigate some of these risks. So yeah, two people is good. When they collude, it's bad. How do we mitigate it? What controls we put in place? We change them around, we switch them up, either individually or together, so nobody gets comfortable. Hopefully, so comfortable that they decide to pull off a collusion program. Collusion is hard to detect. Okay? If people are holding hands under the table, it's hard to see that if they're working together. Now, if one person is not a part of it, then you have a better opportunity. That's why we have two. Because the hope is they'll say to the other person, don't do that, that's thieving. Or if they don't want to listen, report them or to the management. That's what it's supposed to do in order to mitigate collusion issues and to make the internal controls stronger. But that's an excellent question. Okay? And it's something that firms should be thinking about all the time, especially where assets like cash is concerned. Cash is the most liquid asset. If you don't watch it, you will lose some of it. You will lose more of it than you want to lose. Okay? For sure. The cash is not the only thing that people run off with if you don't have any internal controls in place. People run off with boxes at the warehouse, they even throw it out the window and then drive past and at night when everything is quiet and pick it up.
Even just that, all the same thing that you was talking about in reference to checking the inventory, like Lysol now, you buy 20 and then by the next week only 11 there, and then tissue, all these different things that's supposed to be for the organization. It's not there, so it ain't just cash.
Hell no.
Mhm.
I would suggest organization if they don't have anything in place before they put something in place to try and check how much tissue is missing per day, how much how much joy is missing per week, how much how much hand sanitizer, how much, how much spray is going every 3 days, because these are difficult times. People say, and we actually come up with a reason. They say they owe me this anyway. Work hard on here anyhow. They have money. Let them buy some more or whatever we decide to say. It doesn't change the fact that that's not the correct thing to do. All right, but these are real things that are happening actually, and organizations are well aware of this. So the stronger your internal controls, the less you tend to lose. The weaker your internal controls, the more you tend to lose. Collusion is an animal that's hard to detect, but with some good, strong controls, you can manage it better and keep your losses to closer to a minimum as opposed to the upward trend. Okay? So there are two forms of internal control. One we refer to as the accounting control, and the other is the administrative control or the non-accounting control. So these are our two key forms of internal control. Easy test question for the final. What are the two forms of internal control? They might not remember that I've been studying. And see, that's kind of how you study, by being able to isolate interesting things, key points, key headings, key topics, and keeping them in perspective. And then you find once you do that, and you just study it over and over and over, so man, is it really just that? I should have done that the first time for the midterm. Okay. All right. Whatever you do, don't cram. Whatever you do, don't find yourself trying to do all this stuff like 2 and 3 days before, because life is weird. You wait until the last minute, all kinds of other things you didn't plan come up. Like somebody gets sick and you have to take them to the hospital and the car stops working. You didn't anticipate any of these, and they'll roll around right around the time you decided to wait for the last minute and wreck your life. Then you get upset, like, oh God. All right. So what is accounting control? Well, basically just making sure the accounting records are reliable. How do you do that? Make sure they're accurate. How do you do that? Have somebody checking along the way throughout the day to day. all the entries, transactions, etc., to make sure that things are being done properly, in conformity with what we call generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP. And persons who work in the accounting department should have some idea of that. Not everybody's familiar with GAAP in the accounting department. Some of them just go there and they're trained to do certain things, and that's all they do. They don't understand all these crazy things about GAAP and accounting principles. All right, which is why part of the internal control process should be if somebody works in the accounting department has never done an accounting class, they're just doing what people tell them. A major way to create better control internally is to send them to do one accounting class or two. Okay, that's the point. Because the more informed they are, the more accurately they can work, more skillfully they can work. The less they have to listen to somebody who says, "Do it because I say do it that way," even though it might be the wrong way. So they may not be a CPA, they don't have to be. But if they work in the accounts department, if they've never done an accounting class, internal control might be a good idea to send them to a couple of classes. That's the point. So now they not only know what they're doing practically day to day, but they know in principle why they're doing it, the reason for doing it, the reason when you don't do it, and to correct whoever's telling them the wrong thing. Excuse me, I'm doing an accounting class now. According to my text, generally accepted accounting principle says that the way you've been doing this as my supervisor is incorrect. If you say that, what will happen to you? Anybody knows? Will your supervisor appreciate it?
I guess.
I guess or I guess not. Depends on the supervisor. Some people do not like to be correct. Even when they're wrong, they still don't want to be corrected, especially by a subordinate. Which is unfortunate, because who the hell knows everything? Does everybody know everything? Does everybody know everything?
No, we do not. No,
No.
we do not.
Why the hell we acting like we do and get upset when somebody corrects us and we know they're right? Stop getting upset. Just tell them, you know what, Susan? You're right. I didn't realize that. Thank you. And any flicking thing else you see that may be out of order, let me know. That's what you do. You don't get all puffed up, give a bad performance report, no raise. When you see it, like, look at that, man. That's why we keep not being. That's an internal control weakness, by the way. Just having an attitude. How's that? Notice my language? I said it on purpose that way. So you can see how lousy an attitude feels and sounds. How about that? What is the internal control mechanism? To get the language to the way my tone sounds now, so that everybody works in harmony, working together and helping each other to one common goal towards the end of meeting the firm's policies and procedures and objectives. How about that? All right. So the accounting controls now is basically making sure the accounting information is correct and accurate. Everybody's checking. The internal audit department is checking. The budget is being checked and monitored. Cost is being monitored. The ledgers are being balanced. The bank statements are being reconciled, and so on. These are all accounting controls. If any of these are not being done, your control is weakened. If less than half of things are done, dog is beginning to eat your lunch in a big way. You're probably losing stuff and don't even know. Something as simple as a bank reconciliation. Has anybody in this class ever done a bank rec? No?
Yep.
Not like at a tertiary level, but like in high school.
Okay, that's a start. Anybody ever did a bank rec in an organization? Anybody ever did a bank rec for themselves, their own checkbook?
I had to look at it at work and it was very exhausting.
Really? That's, you know
Yes.
why? You know why it was exhausting?
Why?
Because you were not familiar with the process. How's that?
That is correct.
Yeah, so it looks like, oh my God, to hell with it. Okay? But then, so is kissing. Kissing is exhaustive until you learn how to kiss properly. Is it what the flip? I thought this was a big stress. And see, like it's the same thing. Okay, so don't worry about it. Don't mind how it looks. Once you learn how it works, then you start saying, oh, okay, and then making the necessary connections. All right. So yeah, clearly the accounting controls as laid out here ought to be things that are happening. some of you after like maybe tomorrow or Monday, you might go to work and say to somebody in the accounts department, excuse me, do we do bank recs in here? And they look at you like, what the hell are you doing here asking about bank recs? Because in some organizations, they don't do them, or they don't do them on a timely basis, so it's a dirty word. And other organizations do them regularly. So they're like, yes, we do. Why? See? Or you walk in another accounting department somewhere and you do bank recs and say, why you want no? And so now you have two different scenarios. Some say with confidence, yes, we do. Others are like, why you want no? When you hear questions like why you want to know, for whatever you do when your auditors come in and ask you a question, do not ever ask the auditor why you want to know. That makes an auditor suspicious. How the hell you ask me why I want to know? See my point? Asking that question is an internal control weakness. How about that? All right. So that's the accounting side. So if you were ever curious before about what control weaknesses exist in the accounting department, you have it right in front of you now. Never know when you might need to be familiar with one of them, or several of them, or even be a part of it. Like for example, budgetary control. Anybody in this class ever worked on a budget at work? No?
Not really.
Okay.
Just comparing. I just had to compare the budgets from last year to now, or like proposed budgets from what actually happened, like that, but not actually preparing the budget itself. No.
Okay. Well, you'd be happy to know that comparing last year to this year and looking at variances is the major reason why we set, but well, not major, one of the main reasons why we established budgets in the first place, to see whether we're overspending or underspending. And so what you've been doing is looking at that. That's a control. If the budget was set at $30,000 and you pick it up and you see 37,500, then you should want to know, or somebody should want to know, what did we spend the 7,500 on? That's a control. If you don't ask that question, people spend all kinds of crazy stuff with no explanation. Buy a new car, you wouldn't know, like, because you didn't ask, you didn't check. You just say, I'm too busy to inquire as to why we're over the budget by 17,500, brand new car for someone, but nobody asked. My. All right. Well, fortunately or not for you guys, you're not a part of the crazy accounting world. But remember, we already said controls are not only for accounting departments, but finance departments. They are for all aspects of the organization, all aspects. Should we control the cleaning person? Anyone?
Yeah.
Why? Why? They're just a cleaning person. They're not important, according to people anyway.
No.
Why? She's laughing. Why should we control the cleaning person, Rose?
You meaning as in monitoring their level of work, their performance, or their finance? In what ways what aspect you talking about?
That's what I'm trying to get you to think about. And you're already on track by asking about those things. So that's a good point. You're asking what aspect of control do I mean? I mean what you said and other things too. If you don't monitor the cleaning person, what might they stop doing?
Cleaning properly, doing that job.
Cleaning, okay. And if they stop cleaning properly, then you're paying them for what? Cleaning how?
I don't even know what to call that.
Let me help you. Improperly, how's that?
Yes, improperly.
And cleaning improperly leads to what?
Nastiness.
In the organization. And nastiness leads to what?
Disorganization. I mean, I could go on, like I have a whole list of stuff.
Of course, that's my point. So here we are thinking there's no way the janitor should be involved in the internal control process. They're not even important enough to the organization. But yes, they are, aren't they?
Yes.
Because if they don't clean properly, more germs will develop. When germs develop in great numbers, people start getting what?
Sick.
And when people start getting sick, what happens?
People missing out on work.
And when they miss work, what happens?
Then the work pile up. You gotta disturb other people to fill in for them.
And then you don't have enough people to make sure that the controls are in place. And then the controls not being in place because nobody's there to check, and stuff start to happen, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Just trying to broaden your horizons, though. Think out of the box. This thing about internal control is a very serious thing. It's just that nobody seems to think about it that way to any great extent until something is stolen, something specific happens. But these internal control issues are going on every single day, right under your nose in some cases. You'll be shocked to know what people are doing right under your nose because of internal control violations or collusion, one or the other. Remember, collusion is hard to detect. Not impossible, but hard. Sometimes the only time you can find out about collusion if the two people who colluded got mad at each other and rat one out. If they hadn't done that, you'd never know. See? It's like spouses. You only say from your spouse as long as you're getting along, they say. Once you stop getting along, then all of a sudden, one rats on the other. Okay. I know nobody wants to hear that. That stinks. All right. So then what is administrative control? Well, it's everything in the organization that is not accounting and finance. And some even say it includes accounting.
So why does this thing say it should also include accounting controls?
Yeah, that's my point. It says it also includes accounting. And the reason why it includes accounting, and if it includes accounting, then why didn't accounting stuff be included down here? And the reason for that is we want persons to understand that yes, administrative controls includes accounting, but for the most part, we want to keep accounting activity because of its very unique and specialized features and requirements. We keep it separate as a control measure from all the other administrative controls. Okay? In essence, administrative means the entire organization. So, for example, we say in the Bahamas, we say the Davis administration. That means the entire country is being managed by the Davis administration. So everything is included. The Biden administration, see, like that. So when we talk about administration, we're talking about the company or the entity as a whole, which incorporates everything, including accounting. But again, accounting controls have been separated because of their unique nature and requirements. Okay? So once we remove the accounting controls from the administrative control features, we can see that administrative control is basically dealing with operational stuff. Okay? Anywhere from record keeping to organizing how the company will run, the distribution of authority, who will make the decisions, quality control measures, inspections, who will conduct analysis, performance evaluation, and the list goes on and on and on. Okay? Because at the end of the day, all of these things have a bearing on the company's financial statements in one form or another. And so therefore, if we don't make sure that these things are being done, then at the end of the day, the reporting information in itself will be incorrect. And of course, the results will not be as good as we expect them to be because of inefficiencies and waste and theft and so on. Okay? Now, when external auditors come in, typically they deal primarily with accounting controls. Internal audit is expected to deal primarily with internal controls. Sorry, with the day-to-day operation, not the accounting and general ledger side of things. Now, we might have an internal auditor who will go into accounts from time to time and check certain things, but that is not considered the internal auditor's primary function, even though that's certainly a part of the deal. The external auditor's primary function is to come in and check the accounting records to make sure that they are true and fair and correct to the greatest possible extent, which is why the internal auditor becomes so important, because they are expected to check on the day-to-day operational non-accounting stuff and to write their reports and their findings as clearly as possible and present them to the management of the company, the board, and also to present them to the external auditors when they come in, because the external auditors will rely heavily on the information from the internal auditor on non-accounting controls. If they find that they're doing a pretty good job, then the external auditor will spend less time checking non-accounting controls. If they find that the internal auditor is not doing a great deal of work, not recording and reporting information properly, etc., then the external auditor might be forced to do more work to satisfy himself that the controls are actually in place. Okay. All right. Enough yapping for me for the moment. I think I've blabbered for a while now. Let's see who's going to pick up where I left off. All right. Maybe I should start from the bottom today. If I do that. Ebony, you read last week, didn't you? Sorry, week before last. Were you the last person who read?
I think so.
Yeah, I don't know why I remember that, because yeah, I think you came in and said, I'll read or something like that. All right, so I wouldn't pick on Ebony first today. I'll go to the middle and Rose. Are you there, Rose?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so
I
Rose,
can read.
yeah, why don't you pick up with internal control and the auditor?
Okay. The position of the auditor regarding internal control has been outlined in the Statement of Auditing Practices, which says the duty of safeguarding the assets of a company is primarily that of management, and the auditor is entitled to rely upon the safeguards and internal controls instituted by the management, although he will take into account the deficiencies he may note therein while drafting his audit program. It clearly means that an auditor is concerned only with the evaluation of internal control to know its strengths and weaknesses. In cases where he finds that the internal control is inadequate, he should then plan to carry out a detailed examination of those areas where the system is weak. It is therefore necessary for the auditor to acquaint himself fully with the internal control in place and their actual operation. It will help him in the formulation of his audit program. He should bring the shortcomings of the internal control system to management's attention. Little boy, be quiet. You see me reading. The requisites of a good internal control system. You still want me to read with him making noise in the background, Mr. Wilkinson?
Yeah, that's fine. Let him rip.
Okay. The following are essential requisites of good internal controls of a good internal control system. A well-developed organizational plan with the proper delegation of functional responsibilities should be in place. No internal control system can be effective without such plan. Two, a system of authorization and record keeping should be developed with a view to providing proper control over assets, liabilities, revenue, and expenses of the organization. It should be developed in such a way as to ensure that A, assets are under proper custody and they are not improperly used. B, expenditures incurred get proper authorization. And C, revenues received are duly accounted for.
Now stick a pin for me, Rose, because you
Mhm.
said very important things. Let me just say something so it doesn't go over everybody's head. Okay. First of all, notice the first requisition for a good control system, internal control, well-developed organizational plan. So if you have a company that doesn't have an organizational plan, that's the first sign of trouble. And there are many companies that do not have an organizational plan at all. And there are many companies that have organizational plans, but they're not well developed either.
When you say organizational plan, you what exactly is that you're referring to? Not the plan of the internal auditor.
No, that
Okay.
means like having a well-written set of policies and procedures in place that indicate exactly how the organization will run from day to day. That means having a strategic plan in place, medium to long-term plan for where the company intends to go in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, and even 10 years, in some cases beyond. That's what we mean by an organizational plan, rather than just going from day to day and seeing what happens. Winging it, we call it. Okay? Winging it is a problem for a typical firm that's looking to do well in the long term. Okay? It is also considered an internal control weakness because we've been told many times that a ship without a sail is in big trouble. An organization without an organizational plan is like a ship without a sail. It will go to and fro until finally and often it runs into a correct, wherever it smashes and burns. All right. And then in number two, notice the kind of heavy hitting that takes place in terms of why it is important to have proper control over assets and liabilities and revenues and expenses. All these things are vital to the proper and effective running of the organization. It is important because if assets are not held under proper custody, they will be taken, stolen, and used inappropriately sooner or later. If expenditures are not properly authorized, people are going to be authorizing expenditures for things that don't even exist for the company. They'll be buying stuff for themselves, their own business that they're creating on the side using the company's money, etc., etc. Okay? And of course, making sure that all revenues received are accounted for. There are some firms that the internal controls are so weak, they don't have a system where they can record all of their revenue. So they're making money, but because the recording process is so poor or ill-structured, they don't get all of the revenue sales transactions into the general ledger. And so, yeah, they have money in the bank, but it's not being reflected as sales in the general ledger, which means that revenues will each year under these conditions will be understated. And when revenues are understated in accounting, all kinds of other things are affected. Okay? So yeah, believe it or not, she said all that crap in those same not crap, you know what I mean? In those two paragraphs. Okay, keep going. There are some more requisites.
3, a system of healthy practices and traditions should be developed with a view to discharging the duties and functions of the various departments of the organization in an orderly and ethical manner.
Sorry, sorry.
What is that?
Yeah, good. You're gonna ask about that. I'm glad. See, what that means is persons who are in charge of employees, they have to represent what is good, what is fair, what is honest, and what is ethical in front of the employees, so that everybody can see that the management and the supervisors, etc., are expecting employees to act the way they are, and that is by doing those things that are right and proper within the organization. That's what we mean by healthy practices. Don't tell your staff to come in early and you never come in early. Now, of course, supervisory and management people have some other crap going on outside. They may go to a meeting before coming to work. That's not what I mean. Because at this stage of my life, as far as I'm concerned, if people start asking me about time, that's going to concern me because I've been around forever and a day. But typically, don't ask your people to come in and do things that you're not prepared to do. Don't act unethical and expect for them to be ethical. Don't say don't teeth and then they see you teething. Whatever the case might be, that's what we mean by developing a system of healthy practices and ethical behavior. Because employees are always watching each other and they're always watching management and supervisors. Always, all day, every day. And so they're watching, and if your practices are not healthy and your behavior is not ethical, they will see. And they will do one of two things. They will blow the whistle on you or they will adopt your practices. Okay, so be very careful as you move around your organization. As a fellow employee, as a supervisor, and as a management board person. Okay? And again, these fall under requisites of good internal control, and for obvious reasons. If you're practicing these things, you're going to run a stronger, healthier, more honest organization with more integrity. That always makes for a better firm, period. Okay? And better internal controls. Okay, keep going.
Since internal control systems are to be exercised by the personnel employed by the organization, they should be a team of people with sound character and integrity who are properly trained and capable of discharging their responsibilities. Constant managerial supervision and periodical reviews of the system should be introduced with a view to making the system more efficient and effective. The internal audit. The internal audit is described as the verification of the operations within the business by a specially assigned staff. It is an important management tool to evaluate the correctness of records on a continuous basis in an organization. The term internal audit has been defined as an independent appraisal of activity within an organization to keep management informed of operations. It is a managerial control which functions by measuring and evaluating the effectiveness of controls. According to Howard F. Stetler, internal auditing is an independent appraisal activity within an organization for the review of operations as a service to management. The overall objective of internal auditing, therefore, is to assist management with the effective discharge of their responsibilities by furnishing them with objective analyses, appraisals, recommendations, and pertinent disclosures concerning the activities reviewed. In short, internal audit assures management that the system of internal checks and other types of controls are effective in design and operation. The internal audit of the accounts department, for example, is a thorough examination of the accounting transactions to ensure that the transactions are properly recorded, the accounts are properly maintained, and there is no possibility for manipulation of accounts or misappropriation of the property of the business.
Excuse me,
And
we just stop
mhm,
for a moment. Look at number 3. There is what? No.
no possibility.
Yeah, not some, a couple, a few, a multiple. No, 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 no. No possibility for the manipulation of the accounts or the misappropriation of the property of the business, which we saw earlier in the semester. Manipulation and misappropriation. Because it may not be happening under your nose, that doesn't mean it is not happening. And it might be happening under your nose. You just don't know what to look for, or you don't know what it looks like when you see it. It's like a serial killer. You could have a serial killer in your house or you're dating, but you cannot tell by their parents that they are serial killers. And oftentimes you don't find out until you're almost dead. That's when they're killing you.
Oh, gee.
I know.
But
That's,
this
yeah.
seems a bit like a more harder role for an internal auditor as opposed to the external auditor, because in all those other modules it was saying that the auditor can't find all the fraud, the auditor can't find all forms of like errors and stuff like that because
an opinionated conclusion, but like here, now we're talking about internal audit. They're responsible for ensuring no possibility of manipulation of accounts. So why is it that external auditors, is it because they're not familiar with the business that they can be found liable for not detecting these stuff?
Well, that's a good question, and the argument rages on. Now, the fact that we say no manipulation, no misappropriation, doesn't mean that there is none. Oftentimes there is. That's just an expression to keep internal auditors alert. That doesn't mean that internal auditors will find them all. They won't. Just like the external auditors, they won't find them all. But we have to keep the line. Typically, the language is a little more direct for internal auditors because they work directly with the company and directly for the company's interest. The external auditors work in the company's interest too, but they're not a part of the company. Okay, so we have this higher expectation of the internal auditor than we have of the external auditor. But remember our discussion. Remember I said, even though the auditors are saying that they can't necessarily take responsibility and they won't, that doesn't mean that the world still does not hold them responsible. We still do, even though they keep saying we're not responsible for catching every single thing. And the world still says, oftentimes, we don't give a bloody hell what you say. You should have found it. And truth be told, there's nothing to suggest that the internal or external auditor should be capable of finding every single error or misappropriation or manipulation. It's humanly impossible. Okay? That's why we try to create things where we can create gatekeepers. In other words, remember that thing we saw earlier about the objective? We keep a healthy organization, be ethical, be honest, let people see it, practice it in front of everybody so that everybody's on the same page. That's how you minimize it. Cannot stop it entirely. And certainly, there's so many transactions and issues going on, it is humanly impossible to detect them all, for sure. But we try to detect as many as we can. And when we do detect them, we have penalties in place so that those who are responsible will feel the consequences. See? That kind of thing. All right, keep going.
In modern times, an internal auditor carries a new task. The traditional function of checking the arithmetical correctness of the accounts with the help of vouchers and documents, and the verification of a few items such as stock, cash, and fixed assets are no longer sufficient. The duty of the internal auditor now is to chart the procedure, examine the efficiency, and work on programs to improve the assessment of the effectiveness of control. He is expected to plan and arrange his tasks for effective functioning, set clear objectives of his own section, fit his objectives, gain the confidence of the management, and demonstrate the value of his functions by his performance.
So you see, the internal audit function is no child's play.
Real.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why we actually have an internal audit organization locally in the Bahamas, which is part of a worldwide association of internal auditors, which has become a profession in itself, which means that in addition to this kind of stuff, if you're an internal auditor, you can actually take even more advanced courses and become a certified internal auditor after much blood, sweat, and tears.
But do you need a degree in accounts to do that?
No, you don't.
Because this is a lot of pressure. And I'm trying to figure out like, what is the format? Is internal auditing indicative of that organization, or is it just some format across the board? Now you're telling me there's a place where you could go to do that. Like I never knew about that.
That's the whole idea. Yeah, we have an association of internal auditors in the Bahamas, which is part of the Association of Internal Auditors International. And if you're curious, anytime you get a moment, just check it out, and you'll see we have a president, vice president, treasurer, and they govern the affairs of internal auditors who are certified in the Bahamas. Okay, and they're a part of a bigger internal audit organization around the world. That, of course, if you plan to make internal auditing what? A profession.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Keep
Yep.
going.
Okay. The internal audit is carried out generally in the same manner as is followed for a professional audit. However, it varies in form from enterprise to enterprise according to its size and specific needs. In large organizations, the internal audit functions is carried out by the salaried staff who are qualified to conduct professional audits. The internal auditor has to ensure that there is no waste or loss in the organization. He has to follow the provisions of law, standard auditing practices, and procedures prescribed by professional auditors and by the professional bodies controlling the audit system in the country. At the same time, the internal auditor must be aware of the policies and programs of the enterprise where he is employed. He should be professionally competent to carry out a detailed examination of the working of the business. Equipped with professional and expertise and knowledge of the business, he will be in a better position to make the internal audit system more effective.
So now you see it's not a fly by night thing. If anybody in this class is uh, works in internal audit, you can see that the task is not a light one. If you plan to become a professional internal auditor, then that will require more work, more study, more education. And certainly this stuff, if this stuff you're doing now will give you a very substantive insight into the audit process in general, both internal and external, to a very significant point. If you decide to go on to become a professional internal auditor, then you would go on to do the professional qualification, which will include all of these things and more said of all of these things. Okay? If you decide to become.
Okay.
If you don't decide to become, that's okay. Because if you become a supervisor, a manager of any area, over anything of that nature, this knowledge that you have will be of great assistance to you in being effective in any job you do anywhere. That's the whole point. Okay? So if you never go on to be a professional internal auditor, this stuff, if you learn it well enough, you'll be able to apply it and use it in so many different ways in just about any capacity.
You
Okay?
need to make the big money, the big money.
Well, you know what the big money means: blood, sweat, and
Cheers.
blood. Yes. Okay? If you want to earn it the proper way, of course, you can get big money the other way, but that's not the way we are interested in. All right, keep going.
Mhm. The objectives of internal audit. The main objectives of internal audit are as follows: to verify the correctness and authenticity of the financial records and statistical records presented to the management, to ensure that the standard accounting practices are strictly followed in the organization, to facilitate the early detection of errors and frauds, to ensure that all the transactions have been carried out under proper authority and by persons authorized for the same in the business, to review the system of internal controls from time to time and advise management on improvements that can be implemented, to verify that the liabilities have been incurred by the organization for legitimate activities. The efficiency of the internal audit depends on the efficiency of the staff employed for the purpose. The internal audit can only be effective if the internal auditor is given wide authority to investigate transactions, not only from financial angles, but also from other organizational angles. The internal auditor should report directly to top management. He must operate independently of the accounting and other staff. Internal audit versus statutory audit. Both the internal auditor and the statutory auditor have a common interest as far as verifying the authenticity of the accounts are concerned. The soundness of the internal audit relieves the statutory auditor from detailed checking. The internal auditor reviews the operations and performs such functions as evaluation, compliance, verification, and ensures that policies, procedures, rules, and other types of controls of the business are carried out efficiently. He is helpful to the statutory auditor in matters pertaining to the examination of books of accounts. Generally, the statutory auditor accepts some of the detailed checking made by the internal auditor. However, the area of cooperation between internal auditor and statutory auditor is somewhat limited as the statutory auditor has a responsibility under law to various authorities, while the internal auditor is responsible only to the management. The statutory auditor has to carry out his duties in accordance with the standard accounting and auditing practices and the provisions of law which govern the organization. Before accepting the checking of accounts and other documents carried out by the internal auditor, the statutory auditor must undertake such test checks that are necessary to find out the effectiveness of internal audit. Both internal auditor and statutory auditor carry out the examination of records and documents and make physical and other verifications. Despite these similarities, there are differences in the status, responsibilities, approach, and scope of work of the internal auditor and statutory auditor.
Okay, thank you so much, Rose, for that, dragging us through the mud with all this internal audit crazy stuff. Um, in case you're wondering what statutory audit means, it's just a reference to the external auditor as opposed to the internal auditor.
Internal auditor.
Yeah, in the Bahamas and in the United States, for example, you will not hear the term statutory too much unless it's relating to specific process in law, because that's what statutory means. Statutory is a term that's typically used by the Brits because all too often in the UK, for example, as in other countries, external orders are mandatory, means that they have to be conducted by law. We have a similar situation in the Bahamas. We don't use the word statutory, but we do have a law in the books that make it mandatory for all financial institutions in the Bahamas to be audited. Okay? It's not optional. The board does not make that decision. They have to do it. That's what we mean by a statutory audit. It means that the audit is mandatory by law. Okay? Not every external audit is statutory, meaning that the law doesn't cover every single external audit. It just depends on what is covered under the law. And of course, that has to be determined by the company to make sure that they're adhering to the law. Okay? So just in case you see that along the way, don't panic when you see statutory. It really just refers to the external auditor, oftentimes who's making the audit under by law, but not necessarily. Okay? All right. So there are many similarities, as you can see, as you've seen, that Rose mentioned, between the statutory external auditor and the internal auditor. But, you know, there are some differences too. And in that little box, I think I highlighted a couple of the differences between the two. And so if we actually look at them, we'll start to see, for example, on the internal audit side, we say that the internal audit is an arrangement within the organization that goes on a regular basis, checking everything for accuracy, etc., by the staff member or members who are internal auditors. The statutory audit, on the other side, is the examination of the books that are conducted externally by the external auditors, checking the profit and loss, the balance sheet, and all that kind of stuff, and all the laws relating to financial statements to make sure that they're being adhered to by the company. Typically, the internal auditor will not do this. And as far as the financial reporting is concerned, again, the internal auditor can, if they have the ability and the skills, let's say if the internal auditor is a CPA or they have accounting training, yes, they can check financial information and do some of this stuff that external auditors do. But that will not negate the external auditors coming in. Because remember, the primary reason for the external auditors coming in is to provide independence in checking the records. Doesn't mean that the organization is doing anything untoward, but the external auditors have to come in because they represent independence. meaning unlike the internal auditor, they are not connected to the firm, and therefore there's no bias to be had. We know the internal auditor is hired by the firm and paid by the firm, and therefore some internal auditors could be swing, swine, whatever one you want to use in management's direction, even though management might be up to no good. Okay. Hopefully that is not the case in too many organizations, but it is possible. Hence the requirement for an external auditor to come in just to make sure that everybody stays honest, so to speak. The internal audit is not compulsory. The statutory audit is, by law, compulsory if it's statutory. If the external audit is not statutory, then it's not compulsory. That's the important difference. Statutory means the law says you must. If it's not statutory and it's external, that doesn't mean you have to have the audit done. Internal audit is carried out by staff inside. Of course, you know by now external audits are done by auditors outside the firm who are qualified CPAs or other professional qualification in accounting and auditing to do that job. Okay. Let's see, any other differences? Internal auditors do not necessarily have to have the professional qualifications to do the job of internal auditing, but if they do acquire it, they tend to be better auditors, especially if they're looking for doing it as a profession over the long term. But it's not necessarily a requirement to become an internal auditor. You can actually be trained to do it, and for some people, they do it quite well. All right, any other differences?
I wanted to ask about that because, like I told you before, that's the area that they are interested in me learning at work, but I don't have a degree in accounting, so I want to know what exactly do I need to do or what courses I need to take in order to be qualified for it.
So they want you to do internal audit work.
Yes.
Okay, so this course is definitely a plus for you. A lot of things in here you can pull out and see a lot of the areas that we're talking about this semester. You can actually pull them out and apply those techniques to various areas of your organization to see if certain things are in place. But again, you would have to set it up, what we call set up a program. For example, let's say you're going to check, let's say you're going to check, not necessarily an accounting department first. Let's say you're going to check, trying to find something simple. Let's say you're going to check the performance in terms of staff attendance to work. Okay, attendance on time and attending work period. All right, you want to go into the HR department to see how HR is functioning. The first thing you want to do if you're going to do an internal audit of HR is to get the manual or policy on HR. You follow?
Yes.
And then once you get the HR policy, now if you go and say, where's the HR policy? And they say, we ain't got none, you have another problem. But that doesn't mean you cannot do your audit. You can then, say, for example, go online, in your case where you're just trying to get to fit in, and type in steps to auditing an HR department, and then see what comes up, and then take that information along with any information you have in your notes here or otherwise, and then create what we call an audit plan. What is an audit plan? An audit plan is just a step-by-step process on the steps you will take to conduct your audit, the questions you will ask, the things you will check. See my point?
Yes, sir.
It doesn't have to be a big old sophisticated thing. If you're going to check HR, you can have a simple audit plan. One, how do we verify whether people come to work on time or not? See my point?
Yeah,
Then they
you
say-
make it sound so simple. I can't remember nothing.
Sorry?
So you make it sound so simple.
I
Now-
know. But again, you remember, it's not an overnight affair. You do it slowly, slowly, slowly. You read, you Google, you look over your stuff, your notes you have, you finish your semester, you read, and you take it step by step by step. And eventually, the more you read about the practice of internal auditing, you will get better and better. But you have to do it in small steps. Don't try to take big gulps again. Okay? And whatever area that you pick to audit. In other words, you could, for example, you can go to Google right now and say, what areas of an organization, like for example, what pick your organization, whatever industry you're in. And let's say, what industry are you in? Gretchen, what industry are you in?
Finance.
Finance.
Me now?
Yes.
Well, I work in internal control and compliance right now.
I know. And what type of organization?
Well, and oh boy, water supply company.
Okay. Okay. So you work for a company. Okay.
Corporation.
A corporation. And what kind of products does this corporation sell?
Sewage and water.
Good. So then you go to
So what services that is?
what kind of services?
Sewage services, and
Good.
they supply water.
Good. What is the major business? Sewer services or supply water?
I guess supply water or both.
Which one dominates? Which one generates the great amount of revenue?
Water for us.
Water. Okay. So basically you could say first your water company first, and then the sewer business is like secondary, correct?
Correct.
Cool. Good. So you go to Google and say, how would an internal auditor audit a water company? Then you start reading crap. But don't try and read all in one night. Like, no. You just like start looking at stuff, making notes, taking copies, creating like, I do this by doing this first, this second. Sometimes you eventually in Google you'll find step by step. Ask the manager this, ask the supervisor that, ask the doggone other employees that. See my point? And so you make your own little quick and dirty list, and then you get started. Said, okay, I'm going to uh, review a particular area of this water company based on what you have on your list. So you may have 10 questions. So you bust in there with your 10 questions like, first of all, who is the supervisor? And then what do you get back? Nobody. That's a problem. Make a note. No supervisor. See my point?
Yeah.
You follow? And then you start asking the questions that you have outlined. And as they give you correct answers, you make a note. Okay, that's in order. As they don't give you the information you're supposed to get, make a note, this is not in place. And then when you're done, that begins the beginning of, then you write your first little itsy bitsy internal audit report on that area. I went to that area and 7 out of 10 of the things on this list are not there. How about that? And then you get, that's how you start. And eventually, with more reading, more questions, more little reports, you start to get better and better and better. Right? Try that. And I tell you, in 6 months, you'll send me a text or something and say, kiss my foot. I'm ripping up this flicking place now. See my point? But you have to start small, a little at a time. Because if you don't do that, you're going to get frustrated and maybe run out the door. Say, I don't want to work it anymore. And give up a very interesting part of your life. Okay? And maybe some better dollars as well eventually. All right. So now you know that there are some similarities between the statutory auditor and the internal auditor, and there are some differences. So you know I'm going to ask you a question like this. List 3 similarities and 3 differences between. See like that? You already know I'm going to ask a question like that, or you should by now. Okay? And don't get tied up in all the writing. The writing and the reading is for your edification, to look at, read, let the brain absorb it, tuck it away somewhere, that stuff. For study purposes, you just start making simple notes. Similarities, A, B, and C. Differences, A, B, and C. So if I miss and ask the question, you say, okay, ask it. You ask it. I'm reading for that. Okay, that's the point. Okay, Rose, good stuff. Good stuff. All right, let's see who's going to take us to the end tonight. Rose, you did a great job.
Thank you.
By all means.
There's actually questions because I am scared. Like this task was given to me. Like obviously I'm an assistant to an internal auditor, but it's still like they trying to develop a program. So it's like kind of lost. I'm kind of lost, me going into it.
I
So I
know.
just want, I want to do my best and be a good internal auditor. So I just want to know what to do.
Indeed. And the truth of the matter is the first uh in, in control that rears its ugly head is that they shouldn't just throw you in like that. You should have gone in with some kind of mentor or guidance or direction on what to do. And I'm hoping that at some point they will make the decision to do that and not just leave you
Where's
dangling.
this? Where's
Sorry?
this? Where is
Oh,
this?
I worked at credit union. As in, like they tell me with my tasks and stuff is, but it's like I don't feel like there's a format for me to follow. I think I just assist her. So I'm kind of like, I don't know. I still feel a bit lost. Maybe because I might be overthinking it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
So do you have a supervisor?
yeah, I do.
Okay. Well, here's what to do, Rose. You
Hmm.
just continue doing your like how you're doing this program to open to broaden your horizons theoretically. Continue researching the audit function on Google, etc., and that kind of stuff. And then watch what she's doing and wait for the appropriate instructions.
Hmm.
See my point?
Yes, sir.
I know you may want to roll on and start to get the ball rolling, but don't do it too soon. Spend the time, since you're new, spend the time
Hmm.
looking back with coffee and tea, reading stuff, reviewing stuff on Google, seeing how internal audits are done, the kind of questions that are asked for the job that you want in the credit. See, you could go right on and say, internal audit for credit union. See, and start reading the hell out of stuff while you wait for her to tell you what to do. And let her tell you what to do, because you want to wait until you get the appropriate directions, and then over time you're going to get better and better. That's the deal. The good thing is you have somebody who's responsible for that area, and they're responsible for you, so you just follow their lead while you're doing your little blah 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 on the side to become more familiar. See, and eventually you'll be like, wow, I'm getting this. Okay? In the meantime, if you're in the middle of something, you get stuck somewhere or whatever, and you like, I need some feedback, but I don't want to ask my supervisor for some reason, send me an email, some Wilkins, what do you think about this crap? Not crap, you know what I mean? And then I'll answer. So you won't be completely alone in the woods. You actually have someone you can consult other than your supervisor if you feel it's necessary. How's that? Does that help?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so take a deep breath. You'll be just fine if you follow all that crazy stuff I just told you. All right,
Okay.
let's see who's on my list to finish us off for tonight. India. India is always running off to Pakistan for some reason. India, are you there? No. Okay, Danelle, do you know what India is?
No, I would not know where she is, sir.
Okay, Danelle, why don't you finish up for our system of internal checks?
System of internal check. Internal check is a system enforced in business under which the recording of business transaction is arranged in such a manner that the work of one staff member will automatically be checked by others. Spicer and Pegler have determined a system of internal check as an arrangement of staff duties whereby no one person is allowed to carry through and record every aspect of a transaction, such that without collusion between two or more persons, fraud is prevented, and at the same time, possibilities of errors are reduced to a minimum.
So you see, right? You see again, according to Spice and Pegler, no one person should be carrying no transaction through from start to finish. If you work anywhere where that crap is happening, you have a big problem. A whole bunch
Mr. Wilkinson,
yes.
that was one of my issues with coming into the insurance company.
Yes.
They do that all the time.
Yeah, that is
They can go through an entire transaction without any authorization, just do the entire transaction by themselves.
Danielle, I'm happy you mentioned it. That is unfortunate. That should never happen. God knows how many resources may have already been lost as a result of that process. That is an inherent and terrible internal control weakness. And somebody, internal audit, external audit, somebody needs to fix it. Now, I don't know what your seniority is, because if you're not senior or senior enough, or you're a little young chick or young punk trying to give recommendations, people get uptight for some reason. But if you could ever find somebody that you could say to them to say, wait a minute, you know what? I was just reading this thing. See, you don't have to say you're doing an audit class because they might get mad at you or something. I don't know why. But you can say, I was just reading this thing, and I noticed they were saying that about internal controls, if one person is doing the whole thing, that it's not a good thing. And I noticed that we have some of that happening here. Maybe you could take a chance with somebody you feel comfortable with who can along the way somewhere and perhaps bring some change to that. But you can determine within your own situation. But yes, that is a major problem within the industry.
They just say that it's a norm throughout the insurance industry. It's normal.
I know, but remember, we can make anything normal if we do it long enough, correct?
Right.
The only problem is normal doesn't mean it's right. That's where a lot of people get stuck. They think normal means it's right. Normal means it's the truth. Normal means it's okay. Normal doesn't mean any of those things. Normal means whatever somebody calls normal. So if I walk up and slap you in the face every day, I can say, well, I always slap and nobody bothers me. That's normal for me. But is it right? Hell no, by no means. Okay, so that's a very keen observation. I don't know if you have anybody you could pass it to that that's not a good idea. If it's a norm in the industry, you could be in big trouble trying to get somebody to change it. It's probably something that needs to change at the top, but certainly the fact that you're now aware of it is a very significant plus for you. And hopefully somebody who can affect changes in that organization will become aware of it as well, to the extent that perhaps they'll do something. Of course, now you could say, let me see if we have an internal audit department, and if you feel like really, really froggy or something, you can go to the internal audit people and say, it looks like one person is doing the same thing all the way through. Are you guys aware of that? They say, what you may be aware, but they may just say that to get rid of you. Then they may go back and say, what the flick? Or I told him to have done something about it. See my point? Whatever you can throw in at some point to see if you can affect change, give it a shot. But you know your organization, but your observation is right on point. Okay, as far as internal control weaknesses are concerned. All right, keep going.
DPAL has defined internal check as a continuous internal audit carried on by the staff itself, whereby each individual is independently checked by other members of staff. Thus, under internal check systems, staff duties are so arranged that no one person is allowed to record every aspect of the transaction, and the entire work is distributed among the various members of the staff in such a manner that the work of one person is automatically checked by others. The essential elements of internal check are as follows. Existence of checks on day-to-day transactions. The check is to be carried out continuously as a part of the routine system. The work is divided among, that's my 2-year-old.
Man,
The staff
that's a boy or girl again?
is a girl.
Girl, you could give it to me anytime. As soon as you get tired, send me a text, give me the address, and I'll be there to collect her. She's so cute in the back there. Okay, keep going.
The work is divided among the staff, and each staff is assigned a specific task. The work of each staff through independence is complementary to the work of another. The system of internal check is increasingly recognized by the auditor, especially when the size of the concern is large. The existence of effective internal check system relieves the external auditor of detailed checking to a large extent. The extent to which the external auditor can depend upon the system of internal check is based on the procedural tests applied by him to find out the effectiveness of the system. However, the audit cannot be relieved of his responsibilities if he was found guilty of negligence, regardless of the fact that he had tested the internal check in existence in the organization before he had accepted it as correct.
So you see, even though the auditors keep saying we're not responsible if we don't find everything, the world still doesn't agree with the auditor. They still want to hold them liable. And oftentimes, if the loss is so significant, companies will end up suing the audit firm and sometimes even winning if they can prove that the auditor was in any way negligent in not discovering certain significant deficiencies. So audit risk is a very high risk, which is why they have indemnity insurance and all this kind of crazy stuff, so that they are sued, the insurance companies will be able to pay whatever their penalties are. And again, they could be sued even though they operate in good faith, followed all the rules of audit. It could still happen. And in some cases, it's unfortunate. In other cases, it's not, because some auditors are pretty sloppy. They don't do their jobs well for real and should be sued. And some people feel shot, not shot, you know what I mean? Dealt with severely. Okay, for sure. All right, keep going.
Objectives of internal check. To reduce the chance of fraud and errors that may be committed by any member of staff and to make it more difficult. If any fraud is to be committed, 2 or more persons must collude together.
That 2 or more persons must collude together. Collusion is very hard to detect unless something significant happens, which includes whistleblowing, one talking on the other one. Other than that, it's extremely difficult. Okay.
To detect fraud and errors easily and correct them promptly. To exert moral pressure among the members of staff. To allocate duties and responsibilities of every person in such a way that he can be taken to task for any lapse on his part. To increase the overall efficiency of the members of staff by assigning duties based on the principle of division of labor. To have an accurate and reliable record of all business transactions. Essentials of a good internal check system. No single staff shall have absolute control over the recording of all aspects of business transactions by himself. The same staff shall not be allowed to have access to all books of accounts as well as physical custody of the assets. Each member of staff should be responsible for a specific work. All staff who are responsible for assets should take annual leave to prevent concealed fraud. Staff duties should be changed from time to time. Attempts should be made to introduce mechanical devices to prevent the misappropriation of cash. Each transaction should pass through a definite route and through several hands. All books, vouchers, and documents should be classified and made available for easy reference. Proper records must be maintained. Self-balancing ledgers should be introduced to make the system more efficient and effective. No undue importance should be given to any staff member, and too much reliance on any staff member should be avoided.
Stick a pen for a minute, India. Let's just stop there for a moment as we approach the end. Let me just, yeah, sorry, Danelle, sorry, Danelle. No, see, no, not in some cases, given the second, none of that stuff. No undue importance should be given to any staff member. Why do you think they have that there? Anyone? Why do you think we have that there? And too much reliance on any staff member should be avoided. Why?
I guess, for example, when they say undo, that means like, okay, in the bank, if you're a teller, you should have teller functions. Or if you're, let's say you're a receptionist, you should only have certain functions. You shouldn't be able to post a cash transaction because you're not a teller. Because that would be unnecessary for that person to have.
And then, and I guess by extension, perceived as undue.
Right.
Okay. What about the too much reliance? Why shouldn't we put too much reliance on any staff? Why is that a problem?
Well, if you have to go to the same person for every single thing, that's also a problem.
That's what we mean by too much reliance.
Because then you need to have like segregation of duties.
Absolutely. Because when you start putting too much reliance on any staff member, then one person is handling too much stuff, too much information, too much of stuff, and then they start doing funny stuff potentially. Or if something happens, you're stuck because that's the only person with all the information. Or they might take that information and use it for fraud or theft or misappropriation or whatever the case might be. So we have to be careful to not make sure that too much of everything doesn't land in one person's lap. And some organizations have some people who deliberately try to ensure that everything comes to them. Anybody ever had such a person? If anything happens, bring it to me. If they tell you, bring it to me. If they say it to me. If they fall down, bring it to me. Bring everything to me. Anybody ever work with somebody like that? No? It's good. Because eventually, if you have too much of that in one person, things are going to go the wrong way potentially. Okay? All right, and then finally,
division and allocation of duties among staff members must provide for an automatic check by others. Internal checks at minimum should be conducted on the following: cash sales, postal, mail order sales, representatives and agents, purchases, sales, wage payments.
And this list, thank you very much, Danelle. And this list is not exhaustive. Let's go back to number 3, representatives and agents, which includes insurance agents. So that who are doing, the one person doing everything. Okay? That's not good. Okay? Wherever cash is concerned, you better be checking regularly. Stuff coming to the mail, don't let one person open the envelope. There has to be 2 people minimum, by all means. Don't let one person do all the purchases. Soon they can start purchasing stuff for themselves personally or coming up with some other crappy thing to defraud the company. Same thing with sales. I wouldn't talk about salaries because people can manipulate salaries. If only one person is doing it, people can leave the company. They can still be drawing the salary for that person and crediting it to their account. All kinds of other crazy people may die, but they don't remove the salary from the salary sheet because nobody's checking because they're the only one. And they send the money to their own account because nobody else is checking or verifying. By the way, internal auditor, to be, it would probably not be a bad idea when you do an HR audit to find out if everybody on the pay list still works for that company. Hello, anybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our auditor to be our budding auditor in the class, internal auditor, one of these days when you have the strength and the skills and the power at your disposal, that little simple thing, nothing might be wrong, mind you, but checking if everything's fine, checking keeps it fine. See my point? But if it's not fine, so if you go in and say, we're here to review the payroll list, and all of a sudden HR person or payroll person, why you think I TFNA? No, I'm not thinking that at all. We're just conducting an internal audit check to ensure that the payroll schedule is correct. And the audit plan to do that is to check everybody on the payroll list to make sure that they still work for the company, that they have not resigned and they're not dead. How about that? And that's just a little itsy bitsy internal audit check, but it's a very crucial one, like so many internal audit checks. Big time job once you get to understanding what you're required to do. It's a huge responsibility. You're not going to have many friends. You should not have too many friends, because if you, when I say don't have any friends, I don't mean be mean and stinky and don't say good morning and talk to people, but you're going to have to maintain a certain amount of independence. So when you find crap, you could report it fairly on whomever, not only on people you hate and not your friend. My. That's where the ethical side of internal audit come in that we saw earlier. So you see, this is no child's play. It is a very important job, whether you're responsible for internal audit or external audit, or even if you're responsible to your people, your department, and these things that you're learning as part of audit, it can be helpful to you even though you're not an auditor. See, that's the point. Even though you're not an auditor, this information can help you check stuff in your own area, check yourself, check stuff if you're the deacon in the church. Check your house. This stuff can be used to do all kinds of crazy stuff, even if you're not an internal or external auditor. All right. Okay, I rest my case. Any questions before we break? Okay, you guys have been fantastic as usual. I need to send the remaining modules for you. I will send them in 24 hours. If you don't see it, send me a funny email that says, hello, module.
How many more modules we have?
In addition to this one,
60.
at least 4 or 5. I'll look at them and see the content. It'll either be 4 or 5 more. Some of them are a little longer than others. Some of them are not as long. So I'll look at this, the structure and the content and pick up the relevant stuff. But it will probably not be more than 6 in total, including tonight.
Jesus, what is this?
So will we get our exam grades tomorrow?
Like weekend, you say?
Who said tomorrow?
Saturday.
Who tried to tie me up with tomorrow? Rose.
Rosalie.
Sure, I just put just water in the fridge. I didn't even know.
Don't not think
No,
about it.
Mr. Wilkinson, I want to know.
Oh, God, you like misery. Don't worry about it. Just go ahead and move forward with where you are, work on your research paper and all that stuff, and you will get your grade. And remember, it's only a section, a part of the overall. It is not the end of the world, whatever it is. Okay? For sure. Certainly don't get an ulcer because you need to be well enough to do the rest of what you need to do. Okay? Of course, as usual, if you have any questions along the way before our next session, you know where to find me. Drop me a note. I'll be happy to respond. Again,
Mr. Wilkinson,
yes.
sorry. One question in regards to the case study. Is there a format we need to be following? Any standard formats that I need to know in terms of BIF standard or anything like that?
No standard format. just go ahead and let it rip. Use your
Okay.
creative juices. I didn't put any specific directives for a reason, because I wanted you to think out the box, become creative, make up your own responses, and be as creative as you can in answering and responding to the paper. Okay? No specific format.
Okay.
All right. Now, of course, notice I didn't say I need a minimum of 5 pages or nothing like that. But don't write like 1 or 2 pages and say if you don't like it, too bad.
I was
Again,
letting say 1,000 words.
yeah. The thing is, whatever the pages work out to be, that's fine, as long as you answer and respond as completely as you can. That's the point. Okay?
So we don't have to answer them 5 questions in a big old paragraph then.
No, answer each one individually.
Okay, let's check it.
So you should have a minimum of 5 paragraphs, or it could be more if in terms of your answer. So if you
Okay.
answer question 1, the question 1 can have 2 or 3 or 4 paragraphs depending on how you answer it. The same for 2, 3, 4, and 5. You follow?
Okay.
But don't put them in one big old. Answer them individually by the numbers as I have them, as thoroughly
Okay.
as you can. Okay?
All right.
All right. Wonderful. Remember, COVID has not gone anywhere. Please be safe. You want to be healthy going into your final examination and all that crazy stuff. So be safe. Remember, start reading and making your notes early. Do not wait until the week before your final examination to start getting serious about note taking and studying. Don't do that. All right. Take care, and I'll see you guys next week.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.